Hey everybody, I'm Craig. I'm the Drum and Percussion Product Specialist, and today I'm at Long & McQuaid to show you how to assemble, set up, and tune an acoustic drum kit. Let's get at it. All right, so we just got our two boxes home, and now we have to open them up and set them up, and let's get going with that. So open up these guys. Like so. Open these guys up. All right. So the first thing we see are the cymbals. Just take everything out. Here we have our hi-hats and our crash ride cymbal. Trash bag. And here we have the rack tom. So in this case, one of the rack toms and the floor tom are shipped inside of the bass drum. I usually use the bigger bags as I go, like that. And there's the heads for the floor tom. Open up all that stuff, set them aside. And there's the bass drum heads. And that's the contents of the first box. And the next one has a couple more drums and the hardware. So here we have the kick drum pedal. Here we have a 400 series kick drum pedal. And I always have my drum key on me. You will need a drum key at all times. And I get that set up there. Some drummers prefer the felt side, some drummers prefer the plastic side. You get a slightly different sound depending. I'm usually a felt type of person, so turn that around. I'll set that there for later. And here we have the tom holder. And that'll go on the bass drum to mount the toms. And so here we've got the 12-inch rack tom. And obviously, if you are using a utility knife, be careful. Take your time. Nobody wants to get cut. And that's a nice finish called Aqua Blue Sparkle. Next we have the snare drum. Open that up, and that can sit there for now. And here's the throne top. And there's is our throne top. Next, we'll go with the snare stand. And here's your snare stand, pretty standard fare. That's your tilt adjuster. There's your bass. Open those guys up. Give that a tighten. And that's your height adjustment. Some drummers, some like their snare drums low, some high. When you're tightening drum hardware, never over tighten. That's a big thing for me. Never over tighten. As soon as you tighten up, you'll just get a little resistance. Give it a little twist and you're fine. We'll set that there for later. Again, taking care of our trash and cardboard. So you can imagine if you didn't do the whole pile of cardboard trash bag thing, by now there'd be stuff all over the place. So that's a big thing I've noticed over the years is when you are assembling and opening up a kit, if you're not careful, you can have a room full of trash. So try to keep it neat. Nobody trips over anything. And this is our boom stand, or a cymbal stand. It's got a boom arm on it. I'll show you what that means. So we'll get that base open. Okay. So this cymbal stand has 2 tiers for height adjusting, and this is our boom arm. So you can adjust it however you like. Every drummer's different about where they want every angle and every little thing, and it's all personal preference. So we'll leave that there for now. And here we have the hi-hat stand. Now, when it comes to the hi-hat stand, that's where things can get a little bit confusing for beginners. Okay, so that's the bass. You just squeeze that, and it just goes right in there like so. Spread out the 3-leg bass. Make sure it's sturdy, and again, give it a little tighten. Feel some resistance, just give it a little turn and you're set. That's the hi-hat tube, and this is what they call a pull rod, and this is your hi-hat clutch. So that goes in there like that. Actually, what I usually do is I'll screw the pull rod in first, and I'll often use the clutch to do so. Give it a little turn, take the clutch off, put the tube down like that, tighten, and there's your hi-hat stand. And this is the base for the throne. Okay, throne base, open that up like that. And this again is pretty standard fare. It's just a nut and bolt. And you can decide where you want the height of the throne to go. And again, it's totally personal choice about how high you want that to go. When you're sitting on the throne, generally you want the top of your thigh and your knee to be at a 90-degree angle when you're sitting behind the kit. Again, every drummer is different. And we'll just put the throne top on the base and screw that on. And pretty much everything is out of the boxes. So at this point, I'm just going to tidy up my cardboard pile in my garbage bag, get the hardware out of the way, and we'll start assembling. Okay, so we've got pretty much everything unpacked. So what I do at this point is I'll actually take one of the boxes and use it as a work surface to assemble the drums that came unassembled. So we've got our two rack toms and the snare drum that come pre-assembled. The floor tom and the bass drum you have to put together. So we'll start off with the floor tom. And it comes like this. In this particular manufacturer, has got the two hoops just attached to the bottom just for shipping purposes. They do have drum keys in the form of a drill bit that you can put into a screw gun and makes this part even quicker. And a lot of the professional drum techs will have those in their toolboxes just to make things quicker if they have to change heads on the fly. Okay, so these are called the tension rods or the T-rods. And these are the hoops. This is essentially the anatomy of a drum shell. This is what we call the shell. This stuff here is what we call the shell hardware. Like these are lugs, and these are your floor tom leg brackets. And then the part of the drum that actually comes in contact with the drum head is called the bearing edge. And you want to make sure that nothing bangs those. The bearing edge is very important as to how the drum tunes up and stays in tune. And the tone you get has a lot to do with the bearing edge and how it's cut. So make sure you don't damage the bearing edges when you're putting the drum kits together. And here are our floor tom heads. Little trick that I do with complete kits like this, I'll hold the heads up and just tap them with my thumb. This one has a little bit of a higher pitch, so I'm going to put that on the bottom. These are just little drum nerdy things that I pick up over time. Now, a big thing for me too is the logo that's on the head. I'll line it up with the badge on the shell. And again, that's just a nice little tip to make things look nice and pro. You line up the hoop, and we'll get started with the 3 T-rods that were supplied on the drum. And just get the threading started. And the rest of the T-rods and bass drum claws and stuff like that are in this box. So we'll open that up. And there's that stuff. So these are the bass drum claws with the T-rods already in them. There's a drum key that is included. I've already got mine, of course. And there's the bag of T-rods for the floor tom. Open those up. And there. And I'll continue threading the T-rods into the floor tom lugs. There. And these guys here. So what I'll do is just get these just snug. You don't want to tighten them right down. As soon as you feel the tension rod start to get snug against the hoop, and just stop there. because later on when we tune the drum kit, you want to get even tension at these rods so that the head is evenly tensioned over the shell. If these two tension rods are way tighter than these two, it's not going to sit right and it's not going to tune right. So I just get just enough to get those started. Or finger tight, as a lot of drummers will say. That's good enough for now. We'll flip that over and do the top. Again, logo line up with the badge. And we'll get these started. Again, just enough to get the threading a couple times around in there. And there we go. So same thing, we'll just get that pretty much finger tight. Okay, so the heads are now on. They're not, the drum is not tuned, but the heads are on there. And I'm going to grab our floor tom legs and just get those floor tom leg in the floor tom bracket. Again, once you feel some tension, just give it a little turn and you're good. Never over tighten. Never over tighten drum hardware or anything really, because then you start getting into the possibility of getting the threading stripped, and that's no good. And there's our floor tom. Next, we'll do our bass drum. So, an interesting thing, the clear head in this case is the beater head or the batter side, and this is what we call the resonant side or the reso side head. When you're assembling the bass drum, these are called the bass drum spurs, and the spurs are always on the resonant side of the shell. So that's one way to help make sure you don't put the head on the wrong side. So batter head on the batter side. I like to line up the logo with the top, make it look nice and neat. And here's our bass drum hoop. Goes on like such. And here, let's get these. So again, that's our bass drum claw, and this is the bass drum tension rod. Pretty standard fare. Alrighty. So I'm just gonna, again, just give these tension rods just enough tension that the claws are pulling the hoop down just a little bit, and we'll get that head secured on the shell. All right, so I'm just gonna flip that over now. And we're sitting there. Let's just move that back a little bit. All right. And this is our resonant side. Now, a very important thing is to make sure, again, the logo is perfectly straight. And that's just a little thing where most drummers want it to look perfect. If some people get a little upset when you can see a drum and the logo isn't perfectly in the middle, and you want everything to look nice and pro. And you can always adjust that later, of course. And we'll get these bass drum claws screwed onto the drum. Okay. And we'll we'll just get that tightened down a little bit. Okay, so we're pretty much finished the assembly. The drum kit is technically together, and the next step will be actually setting the kit up. Okay, so here we have our bass drum, and like I said earlier, it's our shell, there's our hoops, there's our bass drum claws, and the lugs. These are called the bass drum spurs. And you want to unscrew these and fold them out. And again, what angle you want your spurs at is not really set in stone. A lot of drummers like them in different spots. That's a telescoping bass drum spur, so you just bring that out like so, give it a little tighten. Again, don't over tighten. So if you talk to a bunch of different drummers, they'll have different ideas of how much space you want right here. Generally, you don't want the drum to be touching the floor. You want at least a little bit of space there. What that's going to do is just let the drum resonate a little bit more and give your bass drum a little bit better tone. If it's touching the floor, it's going to choke out the tone just a little bit. And a lot of drummers are concerned about tone, as they should be. Now this is the floor or the bass drum rack tom mount bracket. And this is your tom holder. Goes in like so. Tighten that down. Loosen off these, and those just sit up like that. Out of the 10 and 12 inch rack toms, 10 inch is going to go on the left. If you're a right-handed player, left-handed players would put the 10 over here. I'm going to set the kit up right-handed because I'm a righty. And those guys go on like so, and you just tighten that down like that. So again, no two drum kits in the world are set up the same way. So again, all different drummers are going to set their drums up a little bit differently. Some might want their toms to sit flat. Some might have them down on an angle like this. It all just comes down to personal choice. Ergonomics are obviously a big part of it. You don't want to have to stress or strain to play the instrument. But that right there is pretty much your standard fare. And here's your snare drum stand. Open up the basket. The top of the snare drum stand is called the basket. And this can adjust how much you want the basket to clamp onto the drum itself. And there's our snare drum. Can go onto the stand like so. Now I don't like to have the snare drum basket cranked tight holding the drum, because again, it chokes the tone a little bit. It puts focus on the shell and doesn't allow it to resonate quite as much. So I like snare drum stands just to sit on the stand. Some drummers like it cranked tight. There's no rules really, but everybody's a little bit different in how they might want to go about things. And there's our floor tom. Cymbal stand. And our hi-hat stand. Now, as far as the bass drum pedal, you can see this mechanism here. That's what clamps onto the bass drum hoop, and then you just reach under and tighten that on. So then that just goes onto the bass drum hoop. So I'll go to do that now. So you just put on like so, Slide that on there on the bass drum hoop, and then just tighten it down. And there we go. Next, we can put on the cymbals. So again, this is your cymbal stand. It's got a boom arm on it. And the boom arm just allows you to place the cymbal a little bit more in some more places that you might not be able to if it was just a straight stand. For instance, over top of the floor tom. So many different drummers have so many different spots that they like their ride and their crashes and every little thing. So again, I'm just unscrewed that wing nut and these your felts. So make sure that there's a felt on the bottom, then your cymbal, then the other felt, and then the wing nut again. Tighten that down. You don't want it too tight. You don't want to choke the cymbal. Make sure the cymbal has movement. And next we have the hi-hats. So this can get probably pretty much the only really truly thing that might confuse you if you don't know what you're doing. This is your hi-hat clutch. So we unscrew that and you've got that bolt and your two felts. So that's the top of the clutch, goes on the top of the hi-hat cymbal, like that. And then flip it over, again, felt. Always have a felt on there. You never want metal on metal with the with your cymbals. And tighten that on there. And then these two are designed just to tighten. Some drummers like it a little bit loose on there, and most drummers like it fairly snug. So I actually tighten it on there pretty tight, and then that's what that second one is for, is just to lock that in place. And that's the top of your hi-hat when the clutch is on it. And so then your bottom hi-hat, that just sits right on there just like that. And then you take this part, put it on the pull rod. And now, so if I step on the hi-hat, you can see the pull rod going up and down. So you just step on it a little bit. Again, this is something some drummers like, a very, very minimal space in between the hats. Some like a lot of space in between the hats. It's up to you. So you just step down on the rod, tighten that up. And there's your hi-hat stand. So again, how much space, that's up to you. Me personally, I just like a little bit, just enough that I can get what's called a chick sound. When you step on the hi-hat, it gives that chick tone. And this drum kit is assembled. And the next step may be the more frustrating one, and that's trying to tune the kit and trying to get a good sound out of the drums. And that's something that takes practice and time at getting better at. And but again, you're getting started, and I'll be able to show you how to do that. So again, the snare drum and the two rack toms came assembled, and they actually don't sound too bad. But the bass drum and the floor tom were not assembled, and as you remember, I just put those heads on just barely finger tight, and of course, little loose, very loose. So what I do is I'll always start tuning at the floor tom and then move up from there. So generally speaking, for myself, I like to have the bottom head ever so slightly tighter than the beater side. And again, that's just my personal preference. You could ask a bunch of drummers and some of them might agree and some of them might say they do it the opposite way. And that's where it gets a little frustrating because there's no rules. You can do it how you like. If you get the result that you're happy with, that's the result you're happy with. So I'm just going to tighten up this bottom head a little bit at a time. And I do tighten up the tension rods in a star pattern, the same way a mechanic may tighten up the wheels on a car. And my main concern is to get even tension at the tension rods so that that head is evenly stretched over the shell. And I'll give it a little tap. That's still a little low. So I'm gonna go up just like a quarter turn at a time. You don't wanna certainly crank it. Okay, so that's close. And now I'm gonna do the same on the top. Quarter turn at a time. Getting there. And I can, when I'm turning the tension rods, I can also feel how much tension it's taking for me to tighten that drum. Now there are products that essentially is a tension gauge, and it'll actually measure the tension and you can see it, and that helps you achieve tuning a little quicker as well. Not bad. That tuned up pretty quick. So these toms to my ears are a teeny bit high. I like a bit of a lower pitch tone. So I'm just gonna lower those just a hair. And again, at this point, I'm pretty much fine tuning for my own personal preference. Technically, this kit is ready to be played. Well, the toms are anyway. Those toms are pretty much in tune. Snare drum. So, with a snare drum, again, shell, head, hoop, tension rod, lug. On the bottom, these are the snare wires. That's the reason why it's called a snare drum. And this is called the snare throw-off, or also known as the strainer. And that's what actually engages the snare wires onto the snare side head. When the snare wires are not engaged, sounds like a regular drum, or like a timbale almost. Turn on the snare wires, and there we go. Now you can use this to adjust the tension of the snare wires, and if you adjust the snare wires too tight, and I'll do that just to show you, you'll choke the sound of the snare drum, and hear how it's kind of hum, it's got that hum to it. If you loosen off the wires, you'll get that little bit more, just slightly more articulation and sensitivity. And I'm gonna tighten up the bottom head a little bit. I like my snare drum heads, top and bottom, to be medium tight. Again, some drummers like them loose and low. Others crank them super tight and really high. And I'm personally a little bit in the middle. And I've got it sit in there. So I'm gonna tighten the top head. Again, I always just go a quarter turn at a time. Don't want to over tighten. Not bad. I'm going to tighten that up just a bit more. Now, pretty much all drum kits like this come stock with single ply drum heads. Other drum heads are double ply. Some have built-in sound control rings. You'll see the heads on the toms here are clear, and whereas the snare head is what they call a coated head. It's the frosting on there, and that just focuses the tone a little bit, and it also gives jazz drummers or drummers that like to use brushes, you get that sort of kind of sound on the with the coating. All right, And then lastly, the bass drum. Actually, that kick drum sounded pretty good. Not too bad, all things considered. I'm going to tighten that front head a little bit. Now, again, when it comes to tuning, it really is personal preference. Some drummers prefer the sound of a wide open, like boomy bass drum sound, and others prefer something a lot more tight and punchy. What you can do is put a pillow or a blanket inside the bass drum. You don't want to overstuff it. You just want enough that it's touching both the heads to give you a more focused tone. But again, that's all personal choice. And then oftentimes enough, you can cut a hole in the front head, and generally that's used so that you can get a microphone inside if you are ever going to mic the drum kit, whether for live or for recording. Oftentimes sound engineers are going to want to get a microphone in that bass drum so that they have that much more control over the sound. But with no hole and no muffling, the bass drum is going to be quite boomy. And that you may or may not like that. Some drummers like a big boomy bass drum sound, and others like a tight punchy bass drum sound. And let's hear how that sounds now. I just tightened up that front head. Not too bad. All right. So again, how you like to set a kit up is all personal choice. I like to have my ride cymbal nice and low and easy to reach. I'm not a super tall person, so I like everything low and within my reach. But we're pretty much ready to go. Nice. Cool. So that is your basic assembly, setup, and tuning of a beginner drum kit. My name's Craig. I'm the drum and percussion product specialist. I'm very happy to help out Long & McQuaid making this video. I hope it helps you a lot. And please like and subscribe and tune in. Thank you.